It is becoming increasingly difficult for me with my sermons because I'm now working on 2-hour lessons. So instead of trying to get it in my head that I'm working on a lesson that is really dedicated to 40 minutes, I constantly am, what do you think is going on? Joey's not in here. Any idea? Let me just go to VGA. So my point of that was, I end up trying to just pack a whole bunch of stuff into these lessons because when I go to TV, I'm scared to death that I'm not going to have 2 hours worth of television, of material. It switched by itself. Okay. Y'all, the information that we're going to cover this morning is, to me, is just absolutely phenomenal. When you get down to it, I hope that creates like a big question mark. Faith and genetics go together, and it really is simply unbelievable the things that come from the Bible. And I want to give you just a moment here to get your interest level.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
Nearly 2 centuries ago, in this room, on this floor, Thomas Jefferson and a trusted aide spread out a magnificent map. The aide was Meriwether Lewis, and the map was the product of his courageous expedition across the American frontier all the way to the Pacific. Today, the world is joining us here in the East Room to behold a map of even greater significance. We are here to celebrate the completion of the first survey of the entire human genome. Without a doubt, this is the most important, most wondrous map ever produced by humankind.
The Human Genome Project is the ultimate fulfillment.
Okay. In our lifetime, can you think of anything that is more amazing and a greater breakthrough than the breakthroughs associated with genetics? Just for instance, I absolutely positively know that Che, when she turns 50 or before, needs to make sure she follows the doctor's advice because I've had colon cancer. Now, if we had known this sooner, I would have had the procedure well before I did because my granddad died with colon cancer. And so we didn't know those things back then. And the blessings, besides being able to trace yourself back to Adam, which is a joke, these individuals selling online trying to get you to sign up to this or that and come in and give them some of your DNA and them tell you where you come from, those are not the kind of breakthroughs that I'm talking about. And you might say, what in the world are we talking about? We are really talking about the results of faith. And we're talking about an event that took place in the Bible that was based on faith, that the individual who broke into the genetics originally, he did it because of studying something that we're going to study this morning. And we're supposed to be getting a lesson this morning about how does faith really work. I am convinced that we are going to have problems with this our entire Christian life because this is the one thing the devil does not want you to do. Increase in faith. And to be able to live by faith and to understand what it really means. Now, what I have here is an exercise that I wish everybody would do. You have Hebrews 11, you have Romans, and all I did was typed in the phrase, by faith. If you can see down at the bottom, you might not can because I didn't want to remove the verses, but it says there's 14 verses in Romans alone that say, by faith. Those are verses that a person, I just simply did a search, by faith, and I limited my search to Romans. And this is for sure something that you would need to study because it is the working outline in the New Testament that helps you to realize how often and where you need to go in order to study these things. Now, Hebrews 10 and 11 basically have 18 verses that say, by faith. And these verses are extremely important, and it tells you this is an instruction section of the Bible. When you're saying, okay, I want to try to do better about my faith, and we're not saying, when we say do better, this is not a push at anybody or pick at anybody. It just means we want to be stronger next month and next month and next year and be able to accomplish things like we're accomplishing right now. We have continued forward, have not stopped any of the things that we're doing, and how do we do that? And some individuals know that I've been at Liberty University 2 days out of last week. I actually got in contact with Jonathan Falwell, came upon him at home. He came upon me at home. I was already at his home. And when he realized who it was, he ran in the house. And what moves me to be able to go into areas like that is the faith that moved me to do these kinds of things in the past. It gives you the information and the knowledge and and instead of imagining how terrible things can be, you already have an imagination level because it's based on things that happened the last time we were dealing with him. And so I'm not trying to talk to him about Jerry. I am trying to get him to make a statement about the casino in Danville, because they have a satellite church in Danville, and it's a crying shame that they're not weighing in. And I intend to continue until that happens. Why? By faith. What motivates me? Now, here's the question. Just how does this by faith work? Now, I don't know if you realize, but this is the actual video that we were watching when President Clinton was making that statement. This individual that is producing this video, he goes on and he mentions even more regarding that particular instance. And so I'm going to kill this one and go to the other one and let you hear a little bit more about the gene experience.
The word genetics was discovered by a British botanist, William Bateson, based on the word Genesis.
There's a story about William Bateson that he was going to give a paper in London. He lived in Cambridge, where he was a zoology professor. And the story is that he got on the train to London, sat down and read a paper. And in reading the paper, which he said was Mendel's historic paper from 35 years earlier, he suddenly realized the brilliance of that paper, recognized that all the questions that they were answering in 1900 had been answered already, changed the paper he was going to deliver in London, and once he got there, introduced Mendel to the English-speaking world.
Now, Mendel is an individual who was a Catholic monk, and he was reading the information that we're going to read this morning. And because of him, we actually have the genetic breakthroughs that we have. And as you just heard that woman say, someone had broken through earlier. It was Mendel. Mendel lived in the early 1800s, and he had already come with these particulars. And this morning, here's where he got it. In Genesis chapter 30, we basically have living by faith. with Jacob. Now, I'm going to say to y'all, I cannot leave this area. I am teaching it on TV, and I have gone back, even though you all who have watched the television broadcast know that I got all the way to Genesis 49 on my last broadcast. But in doing that, I actually was backtracking anyway because I had skipped Genesis 28, Jacob's ladder, and I'd skipped Genesis 32, which is Jacob wrestling with an angel. And I know you know that because we did lessons last week on Jacob's ladder. And so in skipping those, I came back to touch them, and now I have to go into another section with y'all that we also skipped that you probably, I don't mean anything by this, you probably wouldn't read it. It's not genealogical, but it is a bit difficult, and when you start reading it, it ends up just creating such a difficulty in your mind because of this. In Genesis 30, you will read of things like ring-straked goats and sheep. You will read of spotted, speckled, grizzled. Now, none of us are goat farmers. If you want to go to a goat farm, if he's still alive, Elka's brother up on the way to Figsboro is a goat farmer, big time. They're Jews, they say. And you know that Jews have to have goats in order to do their thing. And they're eating goats. And so these folk definitely know something about this, but they really don't. So this morning, we're going to be talking about some of that, but we're really not going to be getting into that. But we are going to deal with your life if you can draw the application out of this lesson. So basically, we all know that Jacob worked 7 years for one wife, and he didn't get her. Then he had to turn around and work 7 more years for the one that he wanted. He got Leah, he wanted Rachel, so he works 14 years. And in Genesis 30, verse 25, it came to pass when Rachel had borne Joseph that Jacob said unto Laban, 14 years, he's been working, send me away that I may go into my own place and to my country. Give me my wives and my children for whom I have served thee, and let me go, for thou knowest my service, which I have done thee. Now, we need to go ahead and read 30 through 31. And so, in order to get the good, like the entire context, we need to go ahead and read that and hear what is being said. Now, y'all, just consider, when you're reading this, you have to try to find something that you can identify with and say, where could this help me? What is it that I I'm doing, and how could this help me? Well, my immediate thought to everybody who works is you're hoping that after you've worked 20 plus years that your boss is going to let you go, and he's going to let you go with the retirement and the benefits that he promised you. And so you faithfully, the word faithful, you faithfully fulfill your duties, and you plan and you hope, but you don't know if somebody's going to come along and buy the company and downsize you out and scuttle your benefits and or your retirement. We don't know. And so when you're reading this, you should try to figure out something that puts you into the picture. And if you do that, you'll get more out of it, and you will actually, it's almost unexplainable how that ends up shoring you up as you start imagining things at different times. You can go back to a situation like this. So here he is, he's talking about going back to his country, and we were at verse 26 and 27, and Laban said unto him, I pray thee, if I have found favor in thine eyes, tarry, for I have learned by experience that the Lord hath blessed me for thy sake. And he said, appoint me thy wages, appoint me thy wages, and I will give it. Now look how he answers. And he said unto him, thou knowest how I've served thee, and how thy cattle was with me. For it was little which thou hadst before I came, and is now increased unto a multitude. The Lord hath blessed me since my coming. And now when shall I provide for my own house? And he said, What shall I give thee? And Jacob said, Thou shalt not give me anything. If thou wilt do this thing for me, I will again feed and keep thy flock. Now, basically, you're in this predicament. We're reading this predicament, and he's wanting to go home. And I just, I can think of scenarios that I've been in working with churches where if I left, it was going to cost me, it would change my finances. I would have to move kids from school, find a new dwelling, just all kinds of stuff. And Jacob is dealing with a man that really doesn't want to let him go because he's so prosperous in association and he has control. It's very easy to see that he has control. So let's look at the plan that Jacob puts forth. Now, y'all, you know the little jingle from farmers? We are farmers. We know a thing or two about insurance. Well, guess what? Farmers know a thing or two about farming also. And Jacob has been keeping sheep for 14 years. Now, if you've been keeping sheep for 14 years, anybody in here have had experience with any kind of animals, farm animals, raising puppies, anything like that? You get to know that these animals have traits, and you either learn these traits and behaviors or you go crazy, or you fail, whatever it is that you're doing. And so Jacob, having kept these sheep, he basically knows some things. Now he's about to put his plan in front of Jacob. Now, y'all, it just so happens that I can actually recreate this. Somebody who's done a YouTube on this. It's a little cartoon, but it still is very thought-provoking, and it'll get us through this point, and I think it'll draw you in. So take a listen.
After a while, Jacob returned to his father-in-law and declared that it was time to strike out on his own. Laban agreed and asked what Jacob would need. Jacob smiled that crooked smile of his and said, "Let me have the spotted goats in your herd, and you can have the black ones." Since spotted goats were rare and black ones were plentiful, Laban liked the request and agreed. Then Jacob, with another smile, said, "And any goats in my spotted herd that are black you can have, and any goats in your black herd that are spotted will go to my herd." "Well, fine," said Laban, who thought to himself, "Black goats are common and spotted goats are rare, so I'll have nothing to worry about. I'll have a big herd." So Jacob separated the spotted goats from the black ones, and then he made a spotted stick out of a tree branch and stuck it in the watering hole. His hope was that the stick would magically make both herds of goats have spotted kids. Well, it worked, something, because Jacob's spotted herd had only spotted goats, while Laban's black goats had black kids and spotted kids. So Jacob's herd grew very fast, and every kid born in his herd was his, and many of the kids born in the other herd were his too. Soon his herd of stinky spotted goats was large and growing, and Laban's herd of black goats had grown very slowly. Laban saw this and exclaimed, "What the?" It was not at all what he expected. So Laban had to relent. Jacob, Leah, and Rachel took their large herd of stinky spotted goats and their large herd of stinky kids of the humankind and set off on a new adventure. We could forgive Laban's expectation that the deal would work in his favor. Most goats are black and few were spotted. Of course he'd end up with a large herd and Jacob's herd would remain small, but it didn't work that way. The spotted goats had only spotted kids, and the black goats had black and spotted kids, so Jacob's herd grew quickly. Was it because of a magic stick? Or perhaps the power of a mysterious God? Or perhaps God knew the science, but just didn't have the time to explain to a young, love-besotted desert shepherd and told him to put a stick in it. Perhaps Jacob was just very observant, or perhaps it was none of the above. In a land not quite as sunny as the desert, called Austria, some several thousand years later, there was a monk named Gregor Mendel. He didn't herd stinky goats, but rather liked peas instead. Peas weren't quite as stinky, tasted better. Have you ever had goat? And were much easier to breed and raise. Using peas, he systematically figured out the hidden secret of heredity. That's the subject of our next 5-minute genomics tip.
Now, that's the gentleman that the president was talking about in the first video. All of this actually is happening because someone was reading Genesis 30 and they determined that there has to be something involved in what Jacob was doing. Jacob, what we're looking at is certainly doing something that we need to get something out of this morning, and that is he was having faith. This is a 6-year plan. He keeps herds and you learn a thing or two. That's basically all that we're doing this morning is we're saying, would I, after 14 years, would I still be willing to stay the course and to continue to trust that God is going to take care of me? Because if you remember at Jacob's ladder, God said, I'll bring you back to your father's land, or the Canaanite land. I'll bring you back to your father's house. And so here you are 20 years into trying to be faithful, continuing on, keeping your head up, keeping your hopes up, and the different things that are happening, and then you're ready to go home and you're told, well, not so fast, stay a little bit longer, and you end up staying 6 more years, but there's your plan. So this morning, let's basically look at how this happened, and this is not very detailed. How did the plan work? It depends. Now, Genesis 30, verse 43. And the man increased exceedingly and had much cattle and maidservants, men servants, camels, and asses. Now, y'all, this is the conclusion of the 6 years. What ends up happening is that Jacob, just like you saw the cartoon, as a result of genetics, that he didn't know the word genetics, but he did know from knowing a thing or two about farming, a thing or two about goats, he knew that the speckled goats were not happening all that much in that herd with the black goats. But he also knew that if he would separate them and breed the speckled to the speckle, that he would get speckled, more likely. And if he got a black goat, it went back to the other herd. But also he knew that in the gene, not that he knew the word gene, but just in the way things happen, cows, sheep, horses, they have unexpected offspring. Let me give you one that's just very close to home. There's not a single person in the Falwell family that has red hair, except Jonathan. They're like, why does Jonathan have red hair? Jonathan wonders, why do I have red hair? Nobody in our family has red hair. You see what I mean? Individuals have these traits in them genetically, and because he had been raising these particular animals, he knew that every now and then, even in the black herd, there would be speckles. Those came to him too. So he just started getting more speckled. He's breeding more speckled, and he actually knows how to breed well-endowed animals, like the strongest of the rams and the strongest of the female sheeps. He would make sure that he kept those apart from the weaker, and he continued to breed the stronger, and this is what happened. Now you might say, boy, that's a great ending. That's not the ending. This is not how your life works, is it? Remember, we've been talking in the last few weeks about happy ever after. That's Walt Disney's business. Happy ever after is heaven. But you don't have to be doom and gloom either, because the next few verses are not really going to be all that happy when we look at them. But for this particular segment, he had a lot of increase, a tremendous increase through his idea. Now, here's what's running concurrent with his success. This is the way life is. As you're going along and things are going well, all of a sudden your roof blows off or whatever. Something's going to happen. It just does. Well, what do you do with it? Concurrently, when he is increasing, notice what's happening with Laban's family. And he heard the words of Laban's son, saying, Jacob hath taken away all that was our father's, and of that which was our father's hath he gotten all this glory. And Jacob beheld the countenance of Laban, and behold, it was not toward him as before. So here you go. You're 6 years into it. You fulfilled your part of the bargain, and you have increased tremendously. And unfortunately, Laban has not. And this is just the way things go. Laban ends up turning on him. You can tell that something is wrong. So notice this, the conclusion. It's time to go. And he has to let his wives know what has been going on this last 6 years. Now, I wish Lori was here because it would give me a little pointer where I could say, Lori, I don't always have to tell you all the answers to all the questions that you're always asking me. In this particular instance, it's not like that. He has a plan, and he doesn't really know who he can trust. These are Laban's daughters. And his plan is that he is going to get ahead. He has always been increasing. Let's notice. He tells his wives what actually was going on when he made this plan having to do with all these goats, the speckled, the ring-straked, the different colored ones. And the Lord said unto Jacob, he's telling the past tense, return unto the land of thy fathers and thy kindred, and I will be with thee. And Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah to the field unto his flocks. Now, God is talking to him in the present, but now we're fixing to deal with something in the past. And he has them out 3 days' journey from their father. They have separated the herd a long time ago. They separated 3 days from Laban's herd because Laban witnessed, can you just hear him saying, those are my sheep, those are my goats. So they separate, you bred to my goats and whatnot. So there are three, I have to answer this. Why in the world? Caleb is asking me if I have the key to his car. No idea. I've never had the key to that boy's car. That car. Where was I? And the Lord said, okay, there are 3 days separated, and he has called them out there to tell them what is going on. And in verse 4, Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah unto the field, unto his flocks, and he said unto them, I see your father's countenance, that is not towards me as before. But the God of my father hath been with me. Now, let's go and work. Genesis 31:11. We need to get the context. Antoine's trying to get in. Okay. We're going to read down to verse 11 so that we can get all this into perspective, hear what is going on. I see your father's countenance not towards me as before, but the God of my fathers have been with me. And you know that with all my power I've served your father. And your father hath deceived me, and changed my wages 10 times. But God suffered him not to hurt me. And if he said thus, this is God telling him, the speckle shall be thy wages, then all the cattle bear speckled. And if he said thus, the ring-straight shall be thy hire, then bear all the cattle ring-straight. Thus God hath taken away the cattle of your father and given them to me. And it came to pass at the time that the cattle conceived that I lifted up my eyes and I saw in a dream, behold, the rams which leaped upon the cattle were ring-straight, speckled, and grizzled. And the angel of God spake unto me in a dream, saying, Jacob. And I said, Here am I. And he said, Lift up now thine eyes and see all the rams which leap upon the cattle are ring-straight, speckled, and grizzled. For I have seen all that Laban hath done unto thee. So basically, he is telling his wives, look, I concocted this plan. God told me what to do, and it worked. The breeding program actually worked. But we are now 20 years into this. Here's the key this morning that I want you to see. And I really want you to go back and immerse yourself in that and try to create some image that is associated with your life that possibly is like that, where you're stuck in a relationship, whether it be work, whether it be alone, whatever, that could last 14 years, could last 20 years, and things are happening all around you, and you're trying to figure out, how in the world am I going to get through this? And the problem always ends up being that the devil wants us to diminish what we're doing for God and start taking up this other cause because we don't really have the faith, or he's trying to work on our faith, whether or not we believe that God can bring us through this if we'll just keep at the task. So here we go. Genesis 31:12. He said, "Lift up now thine eyes and see, all the rams which leap upon the cattle are ring-straked, speckled, and grizzled. For I have seen all that Laban doth unto thee." My own self, I am amazed at the passages that I am finding that I never saw before, where it says that God is watching. We went through a whole list of them last week. But the difference is, this one wasn't in the list. Whoever it is that is mistreating you, whoever it is that is trying to trip you, whoever it is that's bugging you and causing you anxiety, it doesn't matter. Just make your list out and then write in Genesis 31:12. God is seeing this. And not only that, we're looking at this individual who was a monk who really didn't care about being a monk. He actually wanted to study peas, genetics. He wanted to put together botany, and it just so happened, this would be the study of plants, it just so happened that this is one of the only individuals in that time frame that also studied mathematics and physics. Most botanists do not get into mathematics and physics. But because he just happened to study those other two, he was able to make mathematical equations as to how many peas did this and how many peas did that. And what was Jacob doing? The same thing. Jacob was watching how many of these rams would end up having speckled if he would keep the speckled together. My point, not only are we getting a lesson on faith, we're also demonstrating that there is all kinds of blessings coming as a result of individuals immersing themselves into this particular section of Scripture, and they're getting things that they never dreamed they were going to get. What's he getting? He's actually increasing his herd, and he is, no matter what Laban does, God is watching, and God is going to respond. How long did it take? 20 years. Now, y'all, we're in this for how long? How long are you going to live before you die? None of us knows. So it basically is a lifetime of depending on God and recognizing that he's paying attention to this. Do I want relief? Yes. Relief? Yes, we're Americans. How fast do we want it? Another jingle. I want my money and I want it now. That's the way we are. But we have to actually realize that's not the way God is operating. So we move from there to the New Testament. 20 years, he tells them his plan, and he has great increase, and you know the rest of the story. He is actually going to leave when Laban goes up to shear his sheep 3 days away. They take off, and they leave out of the land. Now, Hebrews 10:38. How does this work? Here's some of the verses. Now the just shall live by faith. If any man draw back, my soul shall have no pleasure in him. You know, you have to really think about, when you're thinking about quitting, what does a person hope to get from quitting? I'm tired. Okay. When you leave God, you're going to be still tired, and you're going to be without God. Why does that make sense to anyone? it's going to be hard. Everybody's life is hard. But we, somehow or other, we're able, through television or through friends or different things, we're able to get a message telegraphed into our head by these different entities. Life is good away from God. God is just trying to pressure you. So individuals end up falling into that, but we are not of them who draw back unto perdition, but of them that believe to the saving of the soul. Now, here's the answer. Here's the answer to that dilemma. Now, one of the problems, this is the verse that Eugene read, one of the problems that we actually have with this verse right here is actually another verse that somehow or other has been turned against God. So I'm going to go down to the next verse, and then we're going to come back. Well, let's just look at it a little bit. My little children, these things I write unto you that you sin not. If any man sin, we have an advocate. Okay. But the problem is many people read Hebrews 4:13, and they're told, I was told this as a child, neither is there any creature that is not manifest in his sight. But all things are naked and open unto the eyes of him with whom we have to do. God is watching you, Johnny. If you play with matches, you'll wet the bed. That's right in there with that little fairy tale. You see, my parents and my Bible school teachers used this verse against us. They taught us that everything we're doing, God is watching and he's going to get you. Now, does that look like the context of this verse? Can you imagine being Jacob and you're going 14 years and you get tricked? And not only that, you have it in your mind that God is wanting to work you over anyway. And then you find out you're going to have to work 6 more years and God is wanting to work you over anyway. He sees all the things that you do wrong. And we all know there's some things that Jacob was doing that were, everybody has problems, but look at the context. Seeing then, God's watching you. Well, what's he seeing? Seeing then that we have a great high priest that is passed into the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God. Let us hold fast our profession. We have to put this in context with the seeing passages. God is not looking at us to squash us. He is not looking at us to press us. He is looking at us to bless us. He sees the difficulties that we're going through. And just because he doesn't end them in 14 days or 14 years or 20 years doesn't mean that he isn't working out a plan in our life. We could actually be the teacher for somebody else, and it takes them 20 years to actually really, really believe that we believe what we're doing. At the end of 20 years, a person might say, you know what, I thought you were going to give up at 7. I really thought you were going to give up at 14, but here we are at 20, and you are still hanging in there. And guess what? You've got my attention. I don't know if Eugene knows this or not. Last week, Junior Terry was reading Muscle and Shuttle. You never know what circumstances are going to change an individual and their convictions. By hanging in there, God is not trying to work us over. God is actually watching what is going on, and he wants us to know that we have a great high priest. And now we get our verse. Here he is, my little children, these things I write unto you, that you sin not. We all know that the word commandment means prescription. All the commandments are prescriptions. God wants us to be well. And the prescriptions are designed to keep us from getting off into sickness. Sickness associated with the things that sin does to us. They're prescriptions. I want you to be well. Well, if you do sin, if any man sin, we have an advocate. That's your lawyer with the Father, Jesus Christ the righteous. He is the propitiation, the covering. This is the same word in the Greek version of the Old Testament for the mercy seat on the top of the Ark of the Covenant. God is watching, and he has all of the concern in the world. He has given us an advocate, and he is the propitiation for our sins, and not for ours only, but also for the sins of the world. But watch this. Here's the best. This is the verse that we left out of this particular reading. We have this high priest, and God sees everything, and he's not seeing to condemn. For we have not an high priest which cannot be touched with the feeling of our infirmities, but was in all points tempted like as we are, yet without sin. Let us therefore what? Since it is the case that we have a high priest who is our advocate, and God is watching all the stuff that is happening unto us, and he's put all this together so that we can actually benefit, let us therefore come boldly unto the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find grace to help in times of need. Is that not great? After 20 years, you come out with all kinds of increase. But you know, the rest of that story is Esau is out there waiting on him, and he's scared to death. That's the way life is. You overcome one mountain, one obstacle. You keep your faith. God's watching. You have an advocate with the Father. When you say keep the faith, here's what Paul said. I started my lesson with Paul was sometimes all alone. And this is what he said about the problems that he had. And he said unto me, we're going to see that word infirmity. Jesus has been tempted in all points like we have. He knows what you're going through, and God the Father sees it. And Jesus is our lawyer, pleading on our part. And he said unto me, I prayed 3 times, Paul said, to remove this thorn of the flesh. My grace is sufficient for thee, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. What do you do when you end up being weak? You go to your knees more often in prayer. Most gladly, therefore, will I rather glory in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Therefore, I take pleasure in infirmities, in reproaches, in necessities, in persecution, in distresses, for Christ's sake. For when I am weak, then I am strong. Why? Because when you're weak, you're supposed to go boldly to the throne of grace to get help. That's the invitation. If you're here this morning and you're having problems, as we all do, we should be trusting each other, helping each other, praying for one another. And we certainly need to realize God sees our affliction, and he's not looking for our sins. This morning, if we can assist you, why don't you come while we stand?